Hey, welcome, buddy. Yes, I know it is Super Bowl Sunday. This is going to be for people who don't really care about the Super Bowl, like myself. I'm not that interested in it. So people can watch this, or they can go watch that, or whatever else is on. It doesn't matter. This is not going to be very long. Steve Sunday School, I figure 30 minutes, maybe an hour. We've talked about some of these things before, but I kind of want to get a little more detail about them. And people can watch this later. And then maybe if we want to extend a little longer, I'll take some questions from the live chat, possibly. But I'm not going to do that right off the bat, because if we do that, then we'll never get into the actual topic, because people always seem to have questions, which is good, by the way. But I can't always get to the live chat's questions when I'm trying to do something actually more topical. So we're going to be diving into the question of atheists have faith. And now, I know this is going to be triggering to a lot of people, especially atheists, and they'll say, oh, well, I have no faith of any kind. And yet they're not even going to open their minds to have what's called epistemic, actually, it's virtue epistemology, to be open-minded, to kind of understand what we're arguing for here. When we say atheists have faith, we're talking about faith-based commitments that all people have. So atheists are humans. Humans have faith-based commitments. Therefore, atheists have faith-based commitments. So that's going to be the deductive argument that's going to be kind of presented on that. The reason for this is we'll be going into based upon a lot of things that like Ozzy had talked about before. And Ozzy was not too long ago on a podcast, a really good podcast called Apologetics. And Apologetics is a way to kind of counter Christian and theological apologetics. And I think he did a wonderful job explaining these things once again to again people that for some reason don't want to accept certain fundamental things about what's called properly basic beliefs. And it really doesn't matter if you're an atheist or theist or non-theist or whatever. It is something that all humans to exist seem to have the same types of faith-based commitments. Now, people can argue against them. I haven't heard a good argument. I know, for example, Plantinga will argue that God is a properly basic belief. I think there's a lot of arguments to be had against that. I think he's talking about a basic belief. I think what he's trying to convince people of is that God is a basic belief, which it is. God is a basic belief. A basic belief is a belief that we have that can be inferentially inferred, can be used to how we look at the world, right? Our worldview. And we follow a lot of things from our basic beliefs. So a Christian can have a basic belief that God exists, but properly basic is a little bit different. That's based more on classical foundationalism, which I tend to hold to as classical foundationalism. And whether you hold to classical foundationalism or you hold to coherentism or whatever theory of justification you have, I still think to myself, all people still have to have these fundamental faith-based commitments. I don't see anywhere around them. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be explaining, or I'm going to be explaining, a little bit about what properly basic beliefs are. We can go through Ozzy's points on these things, and hopefully I'll do them justice. I'm not Ozzy. I'm not pretending to. We agree on some things. We disagree on other things. But I mean, mostly, I think we're probably 95% on the same page on things. But of course, he's much more well-versed in these topics. I'm a layperson learning them, but I've done pretty well so far, I think. All right, so let's kind of start by what we mean by properly basic beliefs. So properly basic beliefs have certain conditions. These conditions are, I think, ubiquitous to all people. I'm going to go through each one of them, kind of explain to them as we go, and that's going to be the service for today. And then again, we'll get into the live chat if you guys got some questions. I am watching it, but again, I'm not going to be able to address your guys' concerns till this is over, because you probably have questions that will be answered in the video. So Ozzy's 5 points of properly basic beliefs. One, they're unstated and not learned. And what he means by that is that they're unstated and not learned. These are instinctual things. These are unstated assumptions we all have to use to exist. For example, you never had to actually learn by anybody. Nobody actually had to teach you that you had to rely on your senses, right? Or you had to rely on your memory. These are things that you didn't go to school to learn that you had to trust your senses. From an early age, you always trusted your senses, because if you didn't, how would you function in reality, right? So we all have to have some innate instinct to trust our senses from early baby. When you're a baby, you have to trust your senses. Matter of fact, one of the first senses that a baby knows is suckling, right? So a baby that sucklings is instinctual. It trusted that instinct that it was going to suckle and get the mother's milk. So these are unstated assumptions. Other ones would be like the cause and effect. We didn't actually have to be taught that we visually can see there's a cause and effect. I do something, it has an effect. Now, does that always hold true? No, there are some things that probably don't hold true for cause and effect, but it's something we didn't have to learn. To self-identify yourself would be a properly basic belief. Nobody had to teach me that I exist as a self-identification, right? That I have a self-entity. Those are things that are not taught. Those are things that we just assume I exist, right? You want to go back to the cogito. So if you want to go back to the I think therefore I am kind of thing, which has some issues because again I think it does assume too much because you're assuming I, which is kind of a presupposition. So it's kind of circular. But we never were taught how to be our own identity. So that is a properly basic belief. And the most common one we use is the application of induction. So induction is the inference of information to form a conclusion that's most likely the case based upon the premises. We all see inferences every day. We learn from inferences. Deductive logic gives us no new information. Only induction does. But our application of induction, we never really have to learn that. That's something we naturally know how to do because it is a properly basic belief. We cannot function without these unstated assumptions. We cannot learn anything without using induction. Whether we understand induction or not, whether we understand the logic or not, we all use induction. And induction, as we know from Hume's problem of induction, is unjustifiable. There's no justification you can have for the use of induction because anything you try to do to justify it is in itself circular because you're using induction to try to justify induction. That's the main problem with Hume's problem of induction. So the application of induction would be considered a properly basic belief. So when we're talking about atheists having faith-based commitments, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about these types of things. And they're faith-based commitments because they're unjustified and they're unjustifiable. They're unwarranted and unwarrantable. They're things that we assume to be the case because any evidence to one side is also evidence to the contrary, such as, or at least most of the time, for example, like external minds exist. Well, any evidence that I have that external minds exist would be evidence that they're in my mind as well. There's nothing that has a preponderance of the evidence one way or another. It's a properly basic belief that I don't accept solipsism and that I accept that other minds exist. Reality is external to the mind, is a big one too. Reality could be completely in my head, could completely be in your head. But you choose to believe, to hold the belief that reality is external to your head, but that's an unjustified belief. Now, I tend to put the word irrational to some of these things. I don't think it's irrational per se, although it depends on who you talk to. Some people can say, well, it's unjustified, therefore inherently irrational. But I personally, and I don't know where Owsley stands on this, I really don't. He could disagree. But I think the better term to say is an irrational belief. Okay? An irrational belief is not necessarily irrational. It just isn't rational because it's not been justified. So I think holding that reality is external to the mind would be irrational more than irrational. Although I'd love to hear comments on that in the video description after we're done with this. And from the live feed. But so this is what we mean by faith-based commitments. When we say, do atheists have faith? We're not talking about faith that God does not exist. We're not talking about ontology. We're not talking about the great debate question. We're not talking about God's existence or existential things. Except for like external minds, existential. But what we're talking about when they're arguing that atheists have faith-based commitments and they have faith just like anybody else, we're talking about these properly basic beliefs. Because it is faith. It's just blind faith. There's no justification for believing one way or another. It's just we pick a side and go with it because there's pragmatic uses for it, but pragmatic uses are not justification. So the next thing that they is a condition for properly basic beliefs is that they're universally held. And this is one of the biggest problems I have against Plantinga's argument that God is a properly basic belief. Because that belief does not need to be universally held. I could deny that and function just fine. Right? I don't have to have that in my ontology to function. And we also hold that most of these properly basic beliefs, it seems to be all cultures seem to hold these properly basic beliefs. It's everywhere you go. Anywhere you go in the world, all humans seem to have these properly basic beliefs. They all, and if they don't, then we consider that person to be mad or insane. If somebody says, "Hey, I don't think reality exists. I don't think you exist. I'm the only person that exists, and I can do whatever I want, and it doesn't matter because you guys are all not moral agents, and you're agents of moral consideration, and you turn into a sociopath, right? You have no empathy. You basically think you could do whatever you want. That's not how society looks at people. Well, I should say that's how society will look at people that don't have the same type of properly basic beliefs as the other, us, who thinks that reality does exist. So we find that it's universal among cultures that they all have these very similar properly basic beliefs. We got a message. One second. Let me check this real quick. Anything important? Oh, somebody wants to join. Oh, this would be great. Give me 1 second here. Yay. Yes. Give me 30 seconds here to set up a little Google thingy here, and I would love this. Didn't even think about it. Sorry. My other one person was working today, and the other person's not on YouTube any longer. So I am having to do Sunday school by myself. So if someone wants to come in, it just message me. I'm down for that. 1 sec. I've given you the link right now. Copy to share. All right. There you go. Awesome. Sweet. All right, let me go back to my video here. 1 sec. So many different things on these things. All right, so okay, so they're universally held. I mean, like I said, culturally they're just everywhere. The next one would be their ingredients for rationality. And what this means would be exactly what I was saying, that to deny a properly basic belief would be considered to be irrational and lead to madness. And I think it would lead to chaos because we would not have empathy for people. We would not live our lives like somebody actually existed. Like if I didn't think you were a real person, then I wouldn't have no moral conscience to think if I harm you, I should feel bad about that, right? For example, if I'm playing a video game and like Battlefield 1942 and I'm sniping somebody, that is an avatar. That is not an agent of moral consideration, whether it's an actual player playing it or it's just an NPC. I have no moral duty to that NPC to do anything. I could snipe it and blow its head off. It doesn't matter. There's no unethical behavior to do that. Now, there's some ethical behaviors in gaming, right? You don't want to cheat, right? But that's because you don't want to cheat if somebody else is playing with you. If you have somebody that's actually playing and they're using cheat bots and aim bots, that's unethical because now you're dealing with an agent of moral consideration. But the avatar itself, the NPC or the character that you're shooting, is just in the computer, right? So if we had a society that was thinking all people were like that, it would lead to madness. And welcome, Lawrence from Walking Atheist. How are you? Fancy you meeting you here.
I'm doing just good. What'd you say?
Fancy meeting you here.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
Don't
there was
you
a
do
Sunday school,
Don't you do
and I heard
atheist
it had something to do with. I do. I do atheist Sunday school. So
Yeah.
I heard Sunday school and I heard atheist, and I was like, there's just some place I have to be. Something is calling me to Steve McRae's channel.
And by the way, this is not atheist Sunday school. I didn't steal your stuff. This is Steve
Atheist is somewhere in the description.
Yes, absolutely.
The title.
Let me put you on camera here because you're gorgeous. Like, and you
thank you.
You narcissistic bastard. So give me 1 sec. I don't want to give the. How am I going to do this? I don't know how to. I'm using Streamlabs and it doesn't have a studio mode. Does it? Does it have studio mode?
I have no idea. I haven't used Streamlabs. I just use OBS.
Yeah, well, it's Streamlabs is a type of OBS. But I want to.
You're using okay, gotcha. I was like, I mean, we also have Streamlabs OBS, but like I didn't know you just said Streamlabs, so I didn't know if that was just a separate thing.
Yeah, Streamlabs is a different type of OBS. Does it have a studio mode? Yes, it does have a studio mode. Okay, now I got it. It does have a studio mode. I just haven't used it. Well, let me put your window in here so somebody can see you real quick. Window capture. Wrong window, but that's okay. I can fix that. So people know I'm not talking to myself. I'm not a solipsist. There actually is somebody in here.
No, I think you just might be a solipsist.
Awesome. Look at this. I've got it. Now I got to transition. Then I'll blow this down. All right, so they can see you now. I'm not just talking to myself. Oops.
Fantastic. Hello,
Yes.
people. I'm sorry about
Introduce
you
yourself.
experiencing what?
Introduce yourself. People that may not know you from Milwaukee
Oh, right.
Atheist. You're
My
famous.
name is Lawrence, and I am the king of Milwaukee Atheists, and I run that channel, and I also host Atheist Sunday School and Friday Apocryphal podcast.
And he's an atheist, like legit atheist, like full on,
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
yeah, philosophical
No, it's well,
atheist.
it's technically agnostic still, but
Oh, really? I thought
I
you went.
still
I thought you decided to go full atheist. What happened?
no, I didn't decide that.
Oh, okay. Maybe okay. So you're actually still one of you're a philosophical so you're philosophical agnostic colloquial atheist. You're like a sort of
Yeah.
skeptic. Okay. But see, he understands the difference though. That's the whole thing. All right. So I don't know what you missed so far. We're going over the properly basic beliefs, and we're talking about atheists having faith-based commitments, like all other people. Like all humans have faith-based commitments, and this is what we're going to be talking about. So
Sure, yeah.
we've already gone over a few. You're familiar with them. So I'm on right now the ingredients for rationality. That if to deny a properly basic belief would lead to madness and irrationality, like for example, thinking that reality doesn't exist, right? Not just internalized, right? We're not talking about idealism or versus realism. We're not talking about um, um, anything but somebody saying, "Look, I don't think reality actually exists. You're all in my head." That's something we would consider to be
So
irrational, not irrational,
so
but
just
irrational.
just a solipsist.
Yeah,
Is that what you're
solipsism.
describing? Or,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I mean,
Uh
solipsism is a belief that other external minds don't exist. However, people have
yeah.
expanded that to being also that the external world doesn't exist as well, in the most broadest sense.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's yeah, I've heard that as well.
Okay.
I just kind of put it just all under solipsism. Uh I mean, I don't know. I can see how somebody would want to be a solipsist if they just want to deny the properly basic beliefs, specifically because they're, I guess they would just call them faith based, and that would be like the big issue. So I could see how somebody would want to do that. I don't know if you would want. I mean, you might want to call that irrational. I mean, at that point, I stopped talking to them, but
Yeah, I think there would
I
be
don't.
irrational to deny properly basic beliefs. I think are something that I consider to be irrational. That to me, it is a condition of rationality to accept that external minds exist and that reality is external to the mind. If not, you have a society of chaos. You have a society of people that without empathy. Which, by the way, we have a lot of people of. There's a lot of people around that are not empathetic people. I mean, there are horrible people out there. We experience them every day in our community, right? Trolls galore. These are horrible freaking people. Um, but if you can imagine, if we had a whole society that just didn't even care, only because they thought you're an NPC, they treated you just like you would a character out of a game. That would be pretty bad, I think. Right?
I mean, generally, yeah. While you could be nice to characters, you could also be very bad to characters. So
Sure, but you have no moral duty to them, right? I have no moral
no, I know,
duty
I
to
know, I
a
know.
character in a game.
Like it just go one way or the other. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So deny these properly based beliefs would be, um, if, for example, if I didn't think there was cause and effect, right? If I didn't think if I hit you, it would hurt you. There's no effect. If I didn't believe that, right? Because even though cause and effect isn't something we've been uh, taught, we learned instinctually there's a cause and effect. That if I hit you, you're going to be in pain. You're going to flinch. You're going to be hurt, right? If we didn't have that kind of properly basic belief, that would lead to people that are sadist and people that, again, non-empathetic, and it would lead to irrationality, right? Would you agree with that? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I would.
Muted. Okay, so
No,
a couple other
am I?
ones would be it would violated the basic norms of deduction. For example, if we thought deduction for some reason didn't work, if the conclusion doesn't follow from premises that are true, and it's an invalid rule of inference, that would lead to irrationality, right? And I see this happen, by the way. I've seen
Well,
actually
yeah.
atheists more than theists do it, but atheists, I've actually seen it, and I think you have as well, deny logic. Here's the logical proof. The premises are true. It is sound, and they'll say the conclusion is false. Like, ow. Isn't that
Yeah,
not
yeah,
isn't that
that I
not
would definitely
rational?
call. No, I would definitely say that is irrational.
Then why do we see that happen? Because I have logical proofs. They are logically structured. They are valid logically rules of inferences. If you want to say that some of the premises aren't true, we could discuss that. Although I've never had anybody successfully do that. I don't think I've even had more than one person even try. But for the most part, they don't even try to address logical proofs. They just say that the conclusion doesn't follow. But it's like, well, the proof here is valid, and the premises are true. How does the conclusion not follow? And they'll say something ridiculous like, well, just because it does on paper doesn't mean it does in real life.
Well, because I mean, I don't know which specific ones you're referring to, but just as an example, or as a theoretical one, uh, do they try to point out maybe fallacies?
Well, sometimes, but every time they point out a fallacy, they've always got it wrong, right? I mean, I somebody the other day, Uriah Christensen had a syllogism on one of my videos, and it was clearly modus tollens. And the person was like, "Well, that's an argument from ignorance," and I'm like, "No, it's modus tollens." And there's a huge difference. Modus tollens would be P implies Q, not Q, therefore not P. And argument from ignorance would be I hold to X to be true because it's not been proven false, or vice versa. I hold X to be false because it has not been proven true. There's a huge difference we had there. His syllogism was completely valid. Now, whether you want to address the soundness of the premises, that's a completely different story. But you can't say it's not valid, right? If it's a proper use of inference, but that's definitely not an argument from ignorance to say that I'm using modus tollens. But can you imagine if you had a bunch of people that said that deduction just didn't work?
Could I mean, they could probably also respond by saying that even if your argument is valid and sound, could they also say it's insufficient?
Yeah, there's something called there is. There's actually something called as to be what is it called? It's not convincing. Yeah, is it convincing? I think it's convincing. Whether the argument's actually convincing or not, there's a little bit more to most valid and sound arguments that isn't convincing, because there could be valid arguments and sound arguments that's just not very convincing. So but there's also believing contradictions.
And I mean,
Oh, go ahead.
so it always kind of is weird to me. Maybe you could help elucidate this. Wouldn't that just be like a person to person thing that it's not convincing?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think that's subjective.
Okay. But anyways, what were you saying?
Oh, and let's say that you had a properly basic belief that, or let's say you didn't accept a properly basic belief and you accepted contradictions, believing contradictions, and we're not talking about paraconsistent logic where you can have contradictions without principal explosion, which is called dialetheism, which is the types of logic where you can have true contradictions. But let's talk about classical logic. If I believe that contradictions can exist, there's a problem with that, right? Contradictions cannot exist ontologically, and we're not talking about, again, quantum, but we're talking about something along the lines of either your name is Lawrence or your name is not Lawrence. There's no middle ground to be had there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a contradiction. So if I believe your name is Lawrence and not Lawrence at the same time, this would lead to irrationality. So we have a properly basic belief that in our ontology we don't accept certain contradictions, right? And so
Yeah,
if
I'd agree
people,
with that.
okay, so if people didn't accept these faith-based commitments, and that's what they're generally known as, faith-based commitments, then we would think there's something actually wrong with the functionality of their mind, right? This is what insanity actually is. It's something in the mind's not going correctly.
Sure. When it comes to, like, you were talking about a Christian apologist who was referencing God being one of these faith-based commitments. So because I mean, I don't know who that is personally, but do
Plantinga,
you think?
Alvin Plantinga.
Okay. Okay. Would you say, or have you read anything that they said about, would they call atheists then just irrational
No, no. Okay.
or insane or
I,
anything? Because
I
as you just said.
I don't think so.
That's
But again, I don't know. Here's okay. Let me look on the flip side. There's something called fideism. Fideism, I consider fideism to be more irrational than irrational, but fideism at least is unjustified belief God exists. They admit there's no good evidence to accept. There's no real reasons to accept God exists, but they're going to accept that God exists anyways. That's a fideist position, right? Now there's counter fideism, which is the position that there's actually evidence against God existing, but you're still going to accept it anyways. I would say that, for example, if I say, hey, look, there's no convincing evidence of God, but I accept young Earth creationism, that's almost like counter-fideism in my because you're saying that the God exists, even though you have no good reason to believe, you're not justified to believe God exists, and at the same time, you're accepting there's bad information about evidence for God, right? So if there's something like a fideist position for theists, that probably is the fideist position for an atheist too, to say, there's probably no good reason to accept God doesn't exist, but I'm going to accept that God doesn't exist anyways, as an irrational or a rational position. At the very least, whichever one you want to go with, it's unjustified. So a fideist position is inherently unjustified. Now, there is rational fideism that tries to justify it. And I think that's what Plantinga tries to do with Reformed epistemology, is he tries to justify the belief of God as a properly basic belief, but I don't think that necessarily works, because properly basic beliefs are inherently unjustifiable. They're non-dostatically inferred, and they're non-inferential. You cannot derive them from other beliefs. That's the whole point of having them as properly basic beliefs. So the way to think about a properly basic belief is, that's my starting point. That's my axioms. Axioms are not derived, right? They are arbitrary, but they're not derived. And so the properly basic belief is, this is my foundation that I build all my other beliefs on. I believe all my other beliefs upon those properly basic beliefs. Like, for example, all my beliefs are contingent upon reality actually existing. Right? It's predicated on that, right? So anything that I've learned about everything else has the foundation that reality exists, that external minds exist, that induction works. All these things are properly basic beliefs that I build the rest of my foundations on, like my basic beliefs, which are not foundational, but my basic. For example, a theist would build a basic belief that God exists from those properly basic beliefs. That's fine, nothing wrong with that. But he's trying to make that basic belief a properly basic belief, and he does so what's called sensus divinitatis, and I'm probably butchering that. Sensus divinitatis. Is that how you pronounce it? I think that's how you pronounce it.
no idea.
Sensus divinitatis is basically the sense of God, that every man is born with a sense of divinity, that God exists, and therefore predicated on that, then he's trying to say that God is a properly basic belief. I don't think that follows.
No, I just don't think that's true at all either, because there are, commonly used as an example, the Paraha tribe in New Guinea, that
They don't know what
they
God concept
had,
is.
yeah, they don't have a God concept.
Yeah, I agree with you.
They have spirituality. They have, spirits of the trees and everything else and
So
whatnot.
they don't have that sensus divinitatis then.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one would be they're indefensible on pains of circularity, which is actually one of my favorites. And the reason is because any defense of these properly basic beliefs usually will result in question begging or circular reasoning. Okay? Because, like I said, Hume's problem induction would be the case that if you try to justify induction, in order to do that, you have to assume uniformity of nature, which assumes induction, that the past is going to be the same as tomorrow is going to be the same as the past, right? So by assuming induction, because of the uniformity of nature, you're circular, because you're trying to justify the induction by using induction. So they're basically indefensible. You cannot defend the use of induction by using induction. You cannot defend external minds exist by saying, hey, external minds exist. Look, external minds exist because that would be the same evidence in my head, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of the whole, and you pointed this out earlier in the stream, but Descartes, I think, therefore I am.
Which I do think begs the
Kind of the same
question,
thing.
though, because the
that's what I'm
indexical
saying.
I.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I'm gonna have to read a paper on that one of these days. I may got a good paper on that. Let me know. But I do think there's something to be said when you're using the indexical I, you're automatically assuming that you exist. right? Now, maybe I'm completely
Yes.
bizarre on that, but I know that Chris Hansen has that argument as well, and I think he's right on it. And I've heard other
Yeah.
people
No.
say that as well.
Right. I was just saying that I agree with what you said earlier, and that's an example of what we were talking about just now.
Okay. Um, and they're also unwarranted and unwarrantable. Now, what they mean by that is Plantinga uses warrant a little bit differently, I think. When Plantinga uses the word warrant to mean the data that relates a justified true belief to knowledge. Okay? So if we have justified true belief, that does not necessarily mean we have knowledge, right? Knowledge requires other conditions. So the conditions that require, one of which would be the warrant, which to me is just saying that the subject is justified to believe the proposition is true. I don't see a fundamental distinction between warrant and justification, but I think Plantinga does kind of use them slightly different. But it maybe but I know he uses it to mean the data that relates the data that relates the justified true belief to the knowledge. So it gets you to knowledge. So they're unwarrantable. They cannot know. For example, I cannot have knowledge that induction will always work. I can't know that, right? Because I'm assuming, the problem induction. I'm not even justified to believe that induction will work tomorrow. If I'm not justified to believe it, how can I therefore have knowledge which requires to be justified or have warrant to do so? So if somebody says, well, I know induction would work tomorrow, how? And this is...
Well, you don't know that.
By the way, Lawrence, this is a big trap that I see atheists fall into all the time with dishonorable theists like Darwin's deity. Right?
He keeps trying to get... He keeps trying to get into my streams, and I'm like, we're doing a show here, buddy.
Well, but he'll use this to his advantage because he knows that an honest person who knows these topics will have to admit we cannot know induction works for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
we have to understand that. And when I see atheists arguing continually that no, we can know that induction works tomorrow, and they use something like, well, how do you know? Well, it worked yesterday. That's circular. And when Darwin's deity and dishonest theists and presuppositionalists point this out, they're right. Stop arguing that you can justify things like induction. You cannot. If you could, you would be pretty well known because you would have solved Hume's problem of induction. So this is what I'm saying. I think a lot of atheists need to start learning a little bit more about epistemology when they're making these fundamental mistakes. Like, oh yeah, well I can know induction works tomorrow. Well, no, you can't. That is a faith-based commitment that you have. It is faith that induction will work tomorrow, and that's where the atheist gets triggered. Well, it's not faith. Well, yeah, it is. It's blind faith, just like we all have. Because we have no way to justify it. We have no way to have warrant for it. We have no way to have knowledge of it. We're not even justified to believe it. That's blind faith. Does that make sense, Lawrence?
No, it definitely does make sense.
It sucks that it does. I mean, a lot of atheists hate to admit that, but because they've been so ingrained. Well, it's only a theist to have faith. Well, when we talk about the concept of God, that's sure, but we're talking about epistemology here. We're not talking about the ontological nature of God. We're talking about fundamental, properly basic beliefs. And yes, atheists, I see no way other around it. They have to have faith-based commitments like this to function, to be rational. So, you want anything to that before we go to the next one?
No.
Okay. And the last one, finally, the beyond revision on pains of circularity. They're not inerrant. They're not indubitable. You can actually doubt them if you want. What good would that do? I can doubt tomorrow induction would work. I can doubt that if I hit you, it's not going to hurt. Probably be irrational to do so, though. But so there's really no grounds to reject them. And in order to even reject them, we have to use these properly basic beliefs to reject them, which is circular. So I have to use induction to even reject induction. You know, to even say induction won't work tomorrow. Well, how do you know that? I have to use induction to do that. I have to assume reality exists to do that, right? So you can't even revise these things. They're non-revisable. And that's one of the things about classical foundationism. That's why they're called properly basic beliefs. They are the plunks that hold the raft together. In Sosa's paper, Ernest Sosa's paper, The Pyramid and the Raft, he talks about foundationalism as assuming no, not Planck's on the raft. That's coherentism. They're actually they're actually the base of a pyramid, and you can't just go back to the pyramid and remove one of the blocks, right? In coherentism, they're planks in a raft, and you can remove one plank, and you can put another plank in without destroying the whole raft. That's one of the advantages of having coherentism versus classical foundationism, is that some of these things might be a little more revisable. But here, when we're talking about these properly basic beliefs, I don't see even how coherentists can not admit these are non-revisable. You can't just go back and change your properly basic beliefs once you've started your foundation from them, which is reality exists, external minds exist, induction works, those kind of things. So, you want to add anything on that?
Just about like knowledge in general. So when it comes to knowing things, when we're talking about in an epistemological sense of knowledge of some ontic reality,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know I don't know if we can know things, but and it's gonna sound kind of weird. So I just want to finish my thought, and then
Sure.
you can let me know what you think. So when we're looking out into the universe and we discover something, uh, that could be a reflection of ontic reality. But if it is, we wouldn't know if it's a reflection of ontic reality. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Okay,
if
well,
we know things, we could know things, but we don't know that we know things because we would have to have some sort of objective supreme view.
okay, so
But it could be true. Like, it could be ontically true, but we wouldn't have access to the knowledge that it's ontically true.
okay, so you're I think you're more talking about the case whether you have realism versus anti-realism,
I have
structural
no idea.
structural realism. So what the position of this is basically saying that okay, if our reality is what it is, right? We have some kind of base reality, some kind of naive realism. We never have access to that fully, right? This goes back to how we formulate our belief systems. There's semantic ways we formulate our beliefs. There's called semantic theories. And there's also map theories. The map theory would be the map of the terrain. So when I look at reality and I see a terrain, I'm not looking exactly at the actual terrain. What I'm looking at is a map of it, and I'm writing down in my head this map. So if I see this glass ahead of me full of water, right? I see this. This is part of my map of reality. You might see it differently. You might have a different map, but whatever the actual glass is, whatever that is, because like to a mereological nihilist, this glass doesn't even exist. It's not a real object in that case. But the terrain, the reality itself, we had never have epistemic access to that. It's forever outside of our ability to know what is real. And so when we say we have knowledge of something, we have to start with a foundation of what it means to have knowledge. Unless you get into something like skepticism, where you would say, well, knowledge isn't even possible, right? Or a Pyrrhonic skeptic would say, I don't even know if knowledge is even possible or not. So I think what you're asking more along the lines is, if knowledge is possible, do we have to make certain assumptions based upon the fact that we have epistemic limits? I have to say yes. I think that we can never know certain things that are beyond our limits to ever know.
Not quite.
No, okay.
But I would say that if we can, colloquially say that we know something,
Mm-hmm.
uh, like I believe that we know. I can colloquially say that we know the Earth is old. That we know it's billions of years old,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
or that
It meets three criteria. The proposition is true. The Earth is old. You believe it, and you're justified to believe it because of the evidence.
No, yeah, I get that, but
Okay.
I'm saying that we have tested and observed some things to such a high degree that we can say that we quote unquote know them, but unless we have some kind of standard, something more objective, like perhaps we've only gotten certain pieces of the puzzle.
Okay. Well, okay. Hang on. How do
So
you? Hang on. But when we're talking about knowledge, how do you know that? For example, like last Thursdayism. How do you know the Earth wasn't created last Thursday with the appearance of age?
I don't know
You
that.
don't know that, right? So when we say we know the Earth is old, we're working within a specific framework. We're working within
Yeah.
science, right? Within
Yeah.
the realm of science, we have that knowledge because the proposition the Earth is 4.5 billion years old is true, right? In science, that proposition is true. We're justified to believe it because of the evidence, and you do believe it. So we can say we have knowledge. Now, the true skeptic would argue knowledge doesn't even exist because you can never know. The Earth wasn't just made to look that way.
And here I guess would be the difference. That true knowledge might exist, but even if we did have the facts of that true knowledge, we wouldn't be privy to knowing whether or not we know that knowledge.
In other words, you can never be certain you have absolute base
You can
level
never be
knowledge.
yeah.
Yeah, well,
You can't be 100% certain ever.
this is why. Well, this is why you have to again limit yourself to some scope because the knowledge doesn't require certainty. I can know something and not be certain of it. Okay, certainty is not required in what's called weak acceptance of knowledge in the weak acceptance case. In the knowledge in the strong acceptance case, knowledge requires certainty. So if you ever see it written KAP implies CAP, that means an agent has knowledge, implying that he is certain of that. But that's not in the weak form. The weak form is actually you only have to have a belief of it. You don't have to have certainty. So certainty is kind of one of those things that's bantered around. But since certainty is not required in like justified true belief, no, you don't have to have certainty of it. So we can say, I know that, we went to the moon. I know that the Earth is old. But if somebody says, are you certain about it? Well, I'm certain as I can be,
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to get into this absolute certainty of all reality, then sure, you could argue that some fantastical, being had made it appear that way.
Yeah. Like you can go down to like Brahman or something like that.
Brahman? Isn't that a Hindu?
That's Hindu. It's like an underlying reality to everything. And
yeah. So those are the kind of the properly basic beliefs. So this is why I wanted to like get this out there because I know Ozzy and other philosophers have talked about this before. And so when you hear that, do atheists have faith? They're talking about faith-based commitments. And so there's no reason to have pushback on it. You should accept it and just go, yes, atheists have faith-based commitments. And that's because they're rational. I mean, to think about it, to deny these things to me would be irrational. And do you want to be a rational atheist? No, we want atheists to be rational. Right? I mean, Lawrence has an atheist channel. I mean, he wants to have atheists be rational, even though he's actually agnostic.
I still, colloquially speaking, but I do my best to, I've seen so much shit, both good and bad, in the atheist community on YouTube, and I have tried to explore something that isn't generally explored, like the composition and the history of the Bible, because it's really complicated and it's always just dumbed down to such generic statements. And I'm trying to just bring some sort of academic credibility.
And I love that, by the way. No, I mean, I'm a huge fan of what you do. You know that. So I the fact that you want to have atheists up their game, that's the
I think that'd be great.
Yeah, that's the community that I try for, right? That's what I want to have happen as well.
The thing that really got me started on this was, if you're going to debate someone about the Bible, you should probably know what you're talking about.
You think?
So, yeah, so you should probably read all the stuff that's been written about the Bible.
Shocker. Yeah, at least have a little bit of knowledge on it, right? Just like when you're debating philosophy, maybe read a paper on it or something.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is why I generally don't debate philosophy. I'm not a philosopher. I know some basic generic stuff, and I go from there.
So let's look at the live chat for a little while. So like this one person just said, seek mostly prophecy, says evolution is believed, that requires faith. That is incorrect. This is a misuse of the term faith. And let me explain to you why. I believe evolution exists. I also know evolution exists. I have knowledge of it. I can actually state why I have knowledge of it. It is justified true belief. It is warranted. It is true, and I believe it, and I'm justified to. That is knowledge. That does not require faith. It is not a faith-based commitment. It is not a properly basic belief to say you believe evolution. It absolutely is not a properly basic belief. It is the antithesis of a properly basic belief because it is inferentially inferred. We use induction, right? It is disucssingly inferred. We believe evolution because we believe other things that have a coherence with each other.
Right. Although I think they would have an issue with saying that it's a true belief, because maybe it comes down to certainty in that case.
We certainly is not required. That's again, when they start talking about certainty, they're just playing a game.
Okay.
Because I mean, I go read whose paper was it? I think it's Armstrong's paper. If you go listen to my citations, which I'll start having to put in my video descriptions, Armstrong writes a paper and he makes it very clear. I think it was Armstrong that there's a difference between weak case acceptance and strong case acceptance. Generally speaking, normatively speaking, knowledge is weak case acceptance, which means it doesn't require certainty. Now, some philosophers have argued they want it to require certainty, but normatively, as it stands now, knowledge does not require certainty. Knowledge just requires it to be true.
Well, then we can't say we know anything if we have to require certainty.
Yeah, well, that leads into like hard skepticism and stuff like that. So I don't see the point of that. Now, I understand why some people are skeptic, and I mean like in the philosophical sense. They say knowledge does not exist. We cannot ever have knowledge. I understand their reasoning for it, their arguments. They're just not that convincing to me. I take the position we can't have knowledge. Maybe there's no right or wrong answer on it, but the misuse of these things, the misuse, like saying, well, evolution's faith-based. No, it's not. Evolution is based upon inferential information. Evidence is based upon observable, empirical information that we can validate. Now, if you want to get down to the roots, is that predicated on properly basic beliefs? Sure, but so is everything else. Your existence is predicated on properly basic beliefs. You know? So, I mean, if you want to play this silly game of reductionism, that everything is based upon faith, that I have, like Lawrence, you exist, that's faith. No, I that's not a properly basic belief, because
shit.
I have evidence that I can actually infer from, right? I can actually justify my belief because I can infer it using induction and other things. And so the properly basic belief would be something that I cannot infer by use of induction, because, like, for example, using induction, I cannot justify induction by using induction. That is circular. So that is something that is faith-based. So the use of induction is faith-based. But by using induction, I still can make things that I can acquire knowledge from. That's a hard thing for people to get across. You have a faith-based assumption, an axiom, a properly basic belief. But once you have all those, then you can start acquiring a knowledge framework to build from. So I can say I know laws exist, even though it's predicated on the presupposition, it's predicated on the properly basic belief that he exists as a independent mind external to mind. Right? So there's these presuppers that want to like take that and twist it. I find to be a little bit dishonest. Yeah. So what other questions we got? We got about, 13 more minutes or so. He asked, the evidence that is everything is ordered that is going to disorder. I don't know what that means. That's not really what entropy even really is. Entropy is actually more of a thermodynamic function that is unused energy in a system, which will result in the universe as the only isolated system going to more disorder. But entropy itself is actually more related to thermodynamics and the unused heat of a system, or unused energy of a system. It's actually heat loss. Yeah, that's just unrecoverable heat loss. There's different ways of actually describing entropy. Gob says, when I hear the word faith, I hear believing something without sufficient reason. Not believing something without absolute certainty. I don't think we can obtain absolute certainty of anything. Yeah, well, we don't have sufficient reason to justify the use of induction. That is faith, even by that own definition. We don't have sufficient reason to justify the use of induction. So that is, by that very definition, faith. Because and if anybody says, well, we can justify the use of induction because it works, that's circular, right? So it is faith. Lawrence, a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their head around that, don't they? Is that they don't seem to get that you cannot use induction to justify induction. So it's faith that induction will work tomorrow. It's just blind faith. We have no justifiable reason to believe induction will work. We just do because of all the reasons stated on the video right now.
So I want to hear your thoughts on this. I remember in Dillahunty's debate with Cy, he had the example of, if you want to know if a pen works, you pick it up and use it. And then he was like, if that's circular, I'll concede, my point. So, like, I wouldn't call that circular. It's just you're checking if a pen works.
Yeah, I don't. That's not circular. You're not justifying the use of induction. What you're doing is you're just using induction. I'm not trying
Okay.
to. I could say I'm going to see if this pen works. I'm going to take this pen and use it and see if it works. Okay, it works. I've done something. I've acquired knowledge. But
Okay.
where I have to draw the line is saying I'm not justified to actually use the induction to do so. I'm not. It's unwarranted, but I'm going to use it anyways because I need to as a condition of rationality.
Okay.
So that's the problem I see atheists get into when they try to justify this use. They just need to bite the bullet on it. DeBallin said, Steve, would you ever consider doing a show taking short calls of people who have difficult people in their life, like a parent who fight backs with beliefs and need advice on how to deal with them? We are doing something like that. I actually am doing a call-in show in West Covina with Reasons to Believe with Dr. Fuzz Rana twice a month starting in April from their actual studio. And we're going to be doing something along those lines. That's probably something that might be brought up because he's a theist, I'm not a theist, and we know a lot of people have issues in their lives because they've come from a theist family or they come from a non-theist family, and how these different positions affected their lives. So that might actually come up. Kawasa 5,000 super chat Juan. Then would you guys say the favored atheist tactic of hard evidentialism is a net loss for the atheist cause or should be used sparingly? Yeah, I'll answer this first and Lawrence can. I'm not a hard evidentialist. I am actually a moderate evidentialist, or even maybe considered to be a non-evidentialist. The reason being is I think when atheists try to use hard evidentialism, they discount things like prudentialism and pragmatism. And I think that's a detriment to people when they're talking about beliefs. And I think this was one of the issues that it was one of the issues I brought forth with street epistemology. So when an atheist tries to ram home evidential, I think they're doing a disservice to people that have beliefs for other reasons other than evidential reasons, because not everybody's an evidentialist, and there's reasons why I don't think people should be a hard evidentialist. Moderate, sure, or like I said, even a non-evidentialist, because there might be pragmatic or prudential reasons to accept something to be the case, even though you don't have evidence for it, and be justified to do it. And so you can't actually justify something to be rational to hold a belief by prudentialism that's not based upon really any hard evidence. Do you want to touch on that, Lawrence?
For me, it's more about building a working model of reality for everything, in the sciences and in history, and if you discover something that goes against it, well, you revise your position. And I can never be certain of these things, but yeah, saying hard evidentialist because of the presuppositions that all people generally share, like the ones that we covered earlier. Yeah, because of that, you can't really be a hard evidentialist, or if you are, then
All right.
you're just a solipsist, or not even a solipsist. You're
So let me read you this comment. You can tell me the fallacy. Okay. And I'm sorry, April. I'm gonna call you
I'll,
out. April has a fallacy.
I'll
Sorry, April. Love
I'll
you.
give it my best shot.
All right. April says induction has worked in the past. Induction has worked in the past, does work in the present, so it's reasonable to believe it will work tomorrow based upon the evidence we've seen. It may be impossible to be certain, but it's not faith. What's the fallacy?
I have no idea.
Think about it. Induction has worked in the past, therefore it will work in the future. What did I just do?
I mean, that's circular.
Circular reasoning.
Yeah.
Yeah. You cannot say induction has worked in the past because you're using induction to make that claim. That's circular. You're actually straight up using induction, saying, I've seen something happen in the past. By induction, it'll happen in the future. So you're trying to use induction to justify induction. That's circular. This is why it's faith. Daniel says, who are you to be the arbiter of justification? Nobody. This is philosophical 101. This is basically what you go learn if you take a course in philosophy. This is how it's understood in philosophy. This is normative. This is not my particular positions. I do hold these positions, but these things are what you would actually learn if you go learn about these topics. You don't have to accept them.
You didn't. Yeah, you didn't just pull them out of your ass.
Yeah.
That's one of the things there.
Yeah.
Like, I get told I'm lying a lot about the Bible. It's like, I'm not lying. You can cite these scholars. You can disagree with them. That's fine.
Right.
But I'm not.
Well, you know, it's
just
funny you mentioned that.
bullshitting.
Yeah, you know, it's funny you mentioned that, Lawrence. Remember that epistemological seminar that I did in Texas for the Atheist and Christian Book Club? Which, by the way,
Yeah.
was their biggest, most watched event. And everybody there said it was the best one they ever had. And by the way, Richard Carrier and Rob were both prior guests. They like my speech better. So gotta throw that out there. But I was going to go with that. So somebody had actually said that Steve's a hack. He doesn't know philosophy, blah blah. And Stephen Hoyt, who's a major in epistemology, this is what he studies. I think he's working on his master's degree in epistemology. He said, "Whoa, wait a minute! I was there that night in the same room with Steve, and even though I disagree with Steve on some points, what Steve says is the most normative of how philosophy is understood. It's not like Steve's wrong." He's like, I just don't disagree with Steve. I disagree with philosophers as well. He's like, most PhDs would agree with Steve. They disagree with Stephen Hoyt, right? But Stephen Hoyt likes to upset the apple cart even more than I do. But he recognizes that in my presentation, everything I said is normative. He didn't find a single problem with what I said, and that I explained things very well. He just happens, like, for example, he doesn't believe knowledge is a subset of belief, right? I believe knowledge is a subset of belief. I accept justified true belief. Right. That's standard, right? I mean, there are papers out there written where they have, semantic theories where knowledge may not be a subset of belief. And there's also Dr. Linda Zabesky, who says that any belief first theory will have Getty air problems. I agree with her. And that's due to epistemic luck issues. But he admits that what I'm telling people is normative. It's like, it's like listening to somebody like lecture you in a school. Steve's telling you stuff you would normally find if you go read this stuff. He's like, he hasn't found anything I've said is wrong from that view. Now he disagrees with me as far as like nuances that is not found in the books. For example, he'll say that knowledge is not a subset of belief. He'll say that burden of proof isn't the same as burden of justification. But he agrees that most philosophers and most PhDs would agree with me on how it is. So does that make sense? So when they say that I'm some kind of hack or don't know what I'm talking about, well, show it, because even Stephen Hoyt admits, Steve knew his stuff.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I get that a lot.
Yeah. Sweet Heathen chimes in. The Atheist and Christian Book Club was one of the most best groups I've ever been around. Fantastic conversations, and virtually everyone was kind and open. I loved it. Yeah, I gotta admit, that was fantastic. I have never seen a collection of both atheists and Christians so nice. I was treated so well, with so much respect. People that I've never met, never heard of, coming up to me saying, you know what, I've watched your stuff. I think you're awesome. I like what you put out. I like how you present things. Thank you for what you do. It was humbling beyond humbling. And like I said, they've had some big names. Now, I don't have a big channel. I don't have a lot of people watching. I got 100 people watching this particular stream, and I won this Super Bowl. I get that. You got Atheist Experience has 5,000 people usually watching or something like that. But you know what? How many times can Matt Dillahunty kind of say the same things? And yet Matt Dillahunty won't address any of these things, right? He won't address any of my arguments. Arn doesn't address any of my arguments. They just dismiss them by fiat, like the communities on Facebook. They just dismissed one of my posts the other day, Lawrence. I had a logical proof, valid and sound. The admin actually removed it and said, you're wrong by fiat, basically. You're wrong by definition. And I'm like, that doesn't address my logical argument. This is the state of atheism that I've been arguing against.
I could swear you and, well, maybe not you and Matt talked about it, but I could swear that it was talked about on the Atheist Experience at some point.
I've never called the Atheist Experience.
No, I know. I'm not saying you talked to them. I'm saying that, like, I think someone called in and mentioned it, or he mentioned it before they started taking calls. I remember it coming up at some point.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to.
I don't watch Atheist Experience any longer. It's just gotten so boring. It's the same thing.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, how many times can you? How many times can you listen to somebody say, "Well, I don't believe you"?
Well, yeah. It is, a lot of the same stuff. But I could swear that he mentioned it in one of the shows. I'll see if I can find the clip and I'll send it to you.
So what was he specifically talking about? The faith-based commitments?
No. He was specifically talking about, the definition of atheism and agnosticism, like that kind of stuff.
Oh, he does every so often, but he won't address my arguments on it. Yeah, you even mentioned my name and they go nuts. Yeah. because they know the first question I'm going to ask them is, well, I'm talking about normatively how it is in philosophy. I've got all these academic papers, and then they mock that. They're like, well, Steve's argument from authority. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm having citations like you would for any other subject, like biology. It's amazing how much they flip and they'll become what they hate. When you ask them, where's your evidence? They have none. They have no citations, none, and yet I have them all. And they're like, well, Steve's just, he's just being smug and he's just citing experts, and that's an argument from authority, which is not. Well, it's a legit argument from authority. It's not a fallacy.
Yeah, and I don't think that when you cite them, you're not saying these opinions are absolutely true because they're an authority.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which would
Yeah, nobody's saying this must be the case because the authority said so. What I'm saying is this is how it is normatively in the field, and these experts agree with that. Like if I say, Lawrence, that in biology, it is normatively understood, which could be looked at two ways. Normally, normatively means ought. Okay, it ought to be understood. It also could mean the normal case. They're kind of related though, because if you want to learn biology, you ought to use the sensu stricto formal understanding of the term, right? So the word normative to me implies both ought to and normally the case. So it is normatively biology, like evolution, is the change of allelic frequency in any given population of species from one generation to the next generation over time, right? That's normative. Right? Now, if Matt Dillahunty was running a biological group and said, you know what, no, evolution is just change, he'd be a young earth creationist, arguing his definition is what he wants to use for his group, which he can. This is why anybody who argues definitions is a waste of time.
Chemical evolution. You got a stellar evolution.
Yeah. This is what I'm saying, that people want to argue that there's some kind of definitional thing. That's a waste of my time. I don't care about the definitions. I'm caring about the baggage that comes along with it. And Matt and Aaron, they don't ever want to address those things because they don't have the citations to back what they're saying, when my claim is, in philosophy, this is normative. That's it. That's my claim. How many people over the years, Lawrence, has ever shown me to be wrong on that? Ever?
Nobody.
Nobody. Not a single person.
I think some people have tried, but they all come up with the same paper, right? By what's his name? The dude who became like a Christian later.
Oh, Anthony Flew.
Yeah, Flew.
Yeah, well, they probably didn't read it because Anthony Flu's paper was in 1972. It's called The Presumption of Atheism. And he specifically notes that atheism is a belief that God does not exist. That's his argument, that atheism is a belief that God doesn't exist, but he wants to change it to be in the negative. Right. So they clearly didn't read his paper, if that's what they think. I read it multiple times. And also read a brilliant paper by Burgess Jackson in 2017 that he wrote. I didn't read it in 2017. I read it last year, but he wrote in 2017. Maybe I did read it in 2017. I don't know. But anyways, he argues against the entire paper for the presumption of atheism. It does a really good job. And guess what? Guess what logic he uses? The same exact form I use, except he uses G for proposition instead of P and A for agent. I think it is. Okay. So, but the logic is the same. Like if I say like BP means believes P, and I say that atheism is B not P, believes not P, he uses the same exact structure in his paper. This is a peer-reviewed paper, so it's not like I'm making this stuff up. This is a peer-reviewed paper where he's using the same logical descriptions, only he's using as agent. So if I say BP, that means believes P. If I say BAP means agent believes P. He's using, I think, agent, and he uses G instead of P for proposition, but it's kind of the same thing, if I remember correctly. I haven't looked at that paper in a while. But anyways, he's using the same logic, just different symbols. All right, so what other questions we got? Let's see here. Yeah, Anthony Flew. I keep saying Anthony. I'm sorry, Anthony Flew is his, but yeah, Flew is, I think Flew did come up with no true Scotsman fallacy as well, where you start eliminating things to try to it's a fallacy to say, well, here's a set of all things, and you start eliminating one thing or another, making it a no true Scotsman. No true Scotsman would do this kind of thing. Uh, Circular arguments are not fallacious. Depends on the circular argument. There you have rule circularity, you have premise circularity. All premise circular arguments, all premise are all premise circular are fallacious.
If your
Not all
conclusion
rule.
is if your conclusion, if one of your premises is also your conclusion, yeah, that's
Yeah,
circular.
that's premise
That's
circularity.
fallacious.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
all premise circularities are fallacious, but not all rule circularities are fallacious. And rules is a little more complicated when you're actually using the rule inside the argument. It would be hard pressed to give you an example at the moment, but yes, I'm aware that not all circular arguments are fallacious. All right, so I think we went 5 minutes over. Oh well. So last minute questions. Wrap it up now. But I appreciate this, guys. Like I said, I think this is a fun topic. We're going to be doing more like these things. Like I said, I'm getting back in the science and philosophy. Yes, I expect my numbers to dip down. People wanted the drama, and I told them I didn't want the drama. So let other channels be drama driven. We were responding to drama. We still do it every so often, like on Mondays. But there's going to be channels out there that all they want to do is do drama. I'm not interested in any of that because it's just they have to fabricate stuff in order to have views and fabricate stuff to have product. I'm not fabricating anything. Everything I've just told you, you can validate kind of things. This is philosophy. And of course, if you think it's wrong, I'd love to hear the counter arguments, right? So I love to hear why people, how people think you can justify induction by using induction. Adam, $2. Thoughts on Fitch's paradox implying omniscience? I'm not familiar with that paradox, but I'll get back to you on it. Lawrence, have you ever heard of it? By the way, when I've never heard of something, I just go like.
No, I've never heard of it.
Yes.
I'm applying omniscience. I don't know. Is that the whole thing? Like,
let's see here. Finch's paradox is the nobility of Finch's paradox is the nobility of one of the fundamental puzzles in epistemic logic. It provides a challenge to the knowability thesis, which states that every truth in principle is knowable. The paradox is that the assumption implies the omniscience principle that asserts that every truth is known. Essentially, Finch's paradox is the existence of an unknown truth is unknowable, and unknown truths are knowable. So, if all truths were knowable, it would be follow that all truths are fact known. And I think I've seen this before now that I looked at it. I've read this before when we were reading about verificationism, because verificationism has a problem with it because you have to use verificationism to justify verificationism. But people have actually used this argument, if I'm not mistaken, to the omniscience of God. And if God has all knowability, then all truths must be known. So I have heard this before, Adam, but I'm not that familiar with it, to be honest. But yes, I remember reading about this a long time ago. I didn't quite get it back then, so that's why I didn't stick. So it'd just be basically saying that all truths are known. So, like I said, I want to say hi to S.A. Thomason. So, yes, I've already talked about coherentism, foundherentism, and foundationalism before in prior hangouts. I tend to classical foundationalism, although I do see the merit of coherentism, and I think that I thought like foundherentism was actually taking coherentism, and the problem with coherentism, which is going to be circularity versus foundationalism, which is going to be arbitrariness. And I thought it sought to try to remove those problems by kind of joining them together. And so I was kind of wrong on that. Then that was what Susan Hack, I believe, came up with foundherentism. So, yeah, I'm not that familiar with foundherentism because it's relatively new. It's relatively a new theory of justification, and it wasn't what I thought it was, because when I did try to read about foundherentism, I was under the impression to try to get rid of the problems with coherentism and foundationalism. So. Anyways, going to wrap it up so this doesn't go too long, so people can go watch the game. I appreciate it. Lawrence, you got anything you want to shill? Of course you do.
Yeah, you should all go subscribe to Milwaukee Atheists if you want to see some documentaries on religious history, or if you want to join us for our Sunday schools or our Friday apocryphal podcasts. We read the Bible and then some apocryphal stuff, and we have academic commentaries right next to us so we can get a good actual understanding.
Do you do eschatology stuff?
Do we what?
Do eschatology, end time stuff?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Really? Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah, no, I've definitely done a bunch of stuff on eschatology.
I
I
haven't watched
did
those. I must have missed some of those. Hmm.
a forged fiction episode on Revelation and talked about, like, what the number 666 was originally meant to represent. It's Nero, by the way. 666 means Nero,
Yeah, I've heard
and
that as well.
we're pretty certain of that.
Yeah, and I don't think that
Uh,
it has anything to do with our end times. I don't think Revelation has squat to do with end times.
I mean, you should go watch the video and find out. To everyone that's wondering,
Oh, there you
uh,
go.
but it was kind of about it was in a way about end times, but for like like a certain group. Um, but yeah, I go into all the scholarship. I cite all my sources.
What?
It's all good.
You cite
Yeah, I know,
sources?
crazy. I cite sources. It's insane.
And this is, by the way, this is why I like channels like that, because when I watch something like the Atheist Experience, which, by the way, they've done a lot of good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to demean them. I just don't like the way they've gone. Like, for example, they kicked me out of their Facebook group the other day. I'm back in now. But
I think you're just salty.
no, I wish they would engage more. I'm telling you, because I'm so confident in this one subject that I happen to know a little bit about, that it's like they'll go against theists that run the dumbest arguments, but then when they have somebody like myself who has legit arguments, they just shut down. They just completely shut down and say, well, we're not even going to address it because Steve's a meanie poopy head. And so I do think, you're citing citations is great because they don't. Ever ask any of them for a citation on philosophy? Nope. They won't have a jack. Nothing.
Yeah, I recently did a video on the Council of Constantinople, which was the second ecumenical council. But it's really interesting because it was only retroactively ecumenical. It was only for the Eastern Church, but then it was later in the Western Church accepted as authoritative. Uh, so yeah, the whole bunch of stuff I talk about the theologies, and I talk about them in depth too, because I don't want to straw man any of them.
And that's
So
and that's
like I
good. I
read
don't like people straw manning arguments. Yeah.
yeah, like I have there's a great well it's really weird. So it's a 2-volume work, but the second volume is split into 3 books, but they're all volume 2, or split into 4 books actually, but it's all still volume 2. The book it's all called Christ and Christian Tradition. It is really good, and it gives you a fantastic understanding of early church theologies and Christologies. Like it's just really good.
That'd be
So
awesome.
I yeah, I recommend that to people. But yeah, it's a lot of interesting stuff there. So if you want to learn about that stuff from a secular perspective, you should go subscribe to Milwaukee Atheists.
All right. So I just put a question out there before we leave. How many of you in the live chat believe that now, after listening to this, that atheists have some type of faith-based commitments, which we mean by unjustified beliefs, right? That they accept things as unjustifiable based on these criteria, right? Press 1 for yes, 2 for no, and 3 that you've changed your mind on it. That you didn't believe it before, but now that you've seen it laid out for you, it makes sense, and you go, okay, yeah, atheists have some kind of faith. By the way, not relating to ontology. Anybody who says atheist, I like the expression, it takes more faith to be an atheist than a theist, I think is ignorant. I think that's a dumb statement, to be honest with you. So don't conflate the two. We're not talking about that. We're talking about faith in the strictest case of blind faith that we have no reasons to believe one way or another. Is this we do because we couldn't function without them. So to not accept these things would be irrational. That's what we mean by faith, is that we have no good reason one way or another because we can't justify it. They're not justifiable. They're unwarranted and unwarrantable. So a lot of people, so a lot of 1s and 3s out there. A lot of people actually believe this to begin with, and some people actually change their minds. So that's good. Don't be afraid of this stuff. And I know the counter argument is going to be, well, this gives theists ammo, right? It gives them arguments. No, it doesn't. It takes away from them. Because when the theist says, well, atheist, you just have faith just like a theist does. No, because now they're equivocating. And you point that out to them. And by the way, it is the same type of faith in the fact if they say, look, I blind faith God exists, okay, then it is not equivocating. That is actually the exact same thing. But when they say, like, for example, counter-theism, there's evidence against God, but I'm going to accept it anyways. That's a type of faith that I think is For them, they have blind faith. I mean, that would be blind faith. But atheists don't have blind faith that God does not exist. I think they actually have actual arguments why God doesn't exist. Now, most theists don't go around saying, "Hey, look, I believe God exists, and I'm justified to because of this argument, like the fine-tuning argument, or whatever the ontological arguments, whatever the Aquinas' 5 ways." Most theists don't go around doing that. Now, if they did, then great. They're justified to believe God exists. That's called friendly atheism, by the way. Friendly atheism is a position that atheists have, that some theists are actually justified to believe God exists. Doesn't mean that God does. It just means that they're justified to believe it. And so when we're talking about this faith-based commitments, we're not talking about the theist saying, I have a faith-based commitment that God exists. I think they're talking about basic belief. I'm talking about properly basic beliefs. So don't conflate those together, okay? But anyways, thank you guys very much. Look forward to the description or the comments in the video description. And if you got any questions, please message me. I'm happy to talk about this stuff and happy to answer questions on it. Okay? So with that, good night. Go watch Super Bowl.
See ya.
See ya! Oh, should we say amen?
Amen.